Those of us who are in public life, we're always looking for role models. We're always looking for examples of people, who we should follow, and especially when times are tough, and you're trying to do right and maybe it's not popular or people close to you want you to do something else. It's hard to just have the strength on your own sometimes to do the right thing, but if you find a good role model, then it helps. And in that way, and especially as a senator from Virginia, George Washington is just a perfect role model. The architects of our institutions, the ones who were drafting the Declaration or drafting the Constitution, that was not Washington's role, but he was almost the human embodiment of the things that they were writing about, and was chosen to be a leader militarily and politically because they viewed his character as so strong. And I think that actually is one of the great lessons of Washington's life, is that among everything else, it's character that really is king. Integrity, honesty, a degree of personal humility. And then Washington had an unusual ability to look at the big picture and not have it be narcissistic, focused on himself, to look at the future, not the immediate, and try to do the right things. So when he set the example of not letting folks talk him into being, a monarch-style president or a president for life at a time when that was the norm in the world. But he said, no, you serve, but then you step back so that others may serve. He just set some examples, in the 1790s and 1780s and when he was in the military, that are fresh examples for leadership today. There's a special tradition in the Senate, and it is unique to George Washington, that every year, on or about his birthday in the Senate, a senator, and it alternates back and forth between the parties, will read Washington's farewell address that he delivered to Congress as he finished his presidency. And there's no other speech that gets that treatment. There's no other person that gets that treatment. And it is because of the unique character and qualities of the speech. The speech is written in language that is language of the day. So you kind of have to get used to that. It's like seeing a Shakespeare play. You have to adjust to the language. But the insights in the speech are every bit as fresh today as they were when Washington delivered. I mean, three insights just kind of from memory that are very powerful are, first, his warnings about the dangers of excessive partisanship. Washington had his own struggles and tussles with Congress. Even though they loved him and they would have made him president for life, that didn't mean that they always liked each other. And he saw the dangers of political parties and excessive partisanship and warned against them in ways that a listener today will hear and immediately respond to. Second, he warned about debt and deficits and fiscal imprudence. He was a guy in his own personal life who cared about that, but he also understood that it was really important for the nation to be smart on fiscal matters. And the third thing that Washington does, which is very powerful, it's a strain of American thought and there's a competing strain, but you can almost look at our history as a tussle between these competing strains, is Washington argues about being really wary of foreign entanglements, about alliances or treaties or having permanent friends or permanent enemies. Washington sort of had the sense that we were blessed with oceans on each side, and that while we should strive for good relations with all, we shouldn't needlessly become entangled in the affairs of other nations. I think the Washington tradition, people sometimes talk about isolationism. That's not what Washington was about, but he was no permanent friends, no permanent enemies. Let's think about American interests first. I would say his is one tradition, and the other tradition would be what I would call the Teddy Roosevelt tradition. And Teddy Roosevelt was probably the first American president who, in the early 1900s saw that America could be a global deal maker. He brokered the end of the Russo-Japanese War and won a Nobel Prize for doing it. So he was actually okay with entanglements and engagement. But you can look at our political history back and forth over time. We're more engaged, we're less engaged. And Washington probably did about the most compelling job of laying out the reasons for being skeptical about entanglements. And so when that is read every year, we'll read this speech. I'm talking to you now in February. We'll read this speech in 10 days. And when people are in that chamber and they hear it read, they'll be thinking about what should we do with respect to jihadism in the Middle East? What should we do with respect to a negotiation with Iran over nuclear weapons? Or what should we do with NATO at a time when Russia is flexing its muscles in the Ukraine? His words just immediately call to mind situations in the world today, and they make us reflect about what the American role should be. It's the special nature of the speech and the raising of issues that are really timeless issues that enables that one speech to be the one that Congress, the Senate, hears every year. One of my favorite lines is a Faulkner line. History is the attempt to create a usable past. So if it's just the past, that would be of interest to historians, to scholars, but to all of us, if we can make it a usable past with lessons that are for today and tomorrow, that's what really makes history so exciting. That's why a speech like the farewell address, we're not reading it to think about 1797. We're reading it to think about today, and so we all need examples. Truman used to say the only thing new under the sun is the history you haven't read. The kinds of challenges that we deal with are challenges that people have seen before, that leaders have grappled with before, and that doesn't mean you should just copy what they did, but you can learn a lot from how somebody deals with a tough situation. I mean, Washington dealt with challenging situations in the French and Indian Wars, and then in the Revolutionary War, and had to deal with hard situations, both militarily and also in terms of kind of political alliances and who you would line up with. Again, Washington was beloved by his countrymen, but man, he was the first president. He was also the first president to complain bitterly about how irresponsible Congress was. He just really didn't like some of the way Congress would approach things. So when you have a problem, it's comforting to know that people have grappled with them before. It helps you see through to an answer, and that's why the study of Washington's life and how he approached problems, how he approached set-aside leadership, just being a good person, his practical writings about just rules for living, some of which are kind of quirky and some of which are just timeless wisdom. There's a reason that people still read those 220 years after he wrote them. One mistake that those of us in political life make is we try to make others happy or be all things to all people or read a poll and do what the poll says. And Washington knew that it wasn't a solitary profession where I'm just going to do it my way or it's the highway. I mean, he understood leadership is about a group, and you're not a leader if you don't have followers. But I think Washington understood that, with humility, I'm going to decide what is the right thing to do, and then I'm going to do my best to do it. And whether or not people agree with me, they will respect that in a leader, and people do. I've learned again and again in 20 years in elected office that people will respect honestly expressed disagreement more than they'll respect you for saying, oh no, I agree with you, and they think that you're probably just saying that. They could tell with Washington, by all accounts, that here was a guy who had a moral center, who was going to make decisions, who was going to do what he thought best. People didn't view him as a self-dealer who was trying primarily to promote himself. And that meant that even when people disagreed with Washington, they had huge respect for him. And that's the thing about Washington that is interesting, is that it's the character of the man. It wasn't his prose style. I mean, Jefferson was a better writer. Madison was probably a better synthesizer of all this different knowledge. That Madison took all these ideas in and used it in creating this ingenious Constitution that he was a principal drafter of. That wasn't Washington's gift. Washington was plenty bright, or we wouldn't be doing this speech 200 years later. But his real standout quality was the character and integrity. And it's funny you talk about that we kind of think of Washington on a pedestal. I'll tell you a funny story about Washington in my earlier service as governor of Virginia. In the capital of Virginia, there is that beautiful marble statue of the French sculptor Houdon of Washington. And it's a priceless statue in the center of the atrium in the Virginia Capitol that Thomas Jefferson designed, and it is a really beautiful piece of art. When that statue was done, the casting of it that enabled it to be crafted was given the rights of it were given to the Commonwealth. And one of the weird little powers that the governor of Virginia has is if anybody wants to make a copy of that statue, they have to get the permission of the governor of Virginia to do it. And governors over the time, since the statue was installed in the Capitol in the late 1700s, governors over time have granted those permissions on occasion. I didn't know this was a power of the governor of Virginia, but at one point when I was governor, I got a request from the Order of the Cincinnatus. They wanted to do a casting of the Washington statue in Richmond to put at their headquarters here in Washington. And what they said is, and we're going to do it very differently. Every other one of these that's been done has been put on a pedestal. We want to do it, and we want to put it basically at pedestrian level so that you can walk up to that statue and kind of confront the man, not confront the myth. And so they cast the statue, and they have it. It's slightly larger than life size, but they have it in a way where you can really kind of take Washington off the pedestal and see that beautiful work of art and see the man in a different way. And you got to be careful about putting people on pedestals, because every leader, even the best, even Washington, had their quirks and their weaknesses and their failings and flaws. And that's not to demean the person. Actually, when you become aware of that, it makes you have more respect that, wow, a flawed person can really do some amazing things. And that's a great life lesson, not only for leaders, but it's a great life lesson for anybody. The amazing degree to which flawed individuals can accomplish great things. That's an important thing. How do you inspire people? We ought to all try to do that. If you're a leader, it's not just about meeting everybody where they are and having everybody stay in their comfort zone. You're trying to call forth something bigger out of yourself and out of others. I think one of the things that is indispensable for a leader is you have to show others that you're willing to sacrifice. And a lot of leaders want to lead, but they don't want to sacrifice. I mean, think of some of the challenges we have in contemporary society where CEOs make, hundreds of times what a worker makes, and the perks are amazing. Or you see, people in political life who, may be more about themselves than about those they're serving. If the folks in the company or in the polity don't see that the leader is willing to sacrifice, they're not going to be inspired to do great things themselves. And Washington, he would sacrifice. When he would have rather been at home, he was a warrior. When he would have rather been at home, he would accept the draft to lead at a difficult and challenging time at the nation's birth. And I think people had that understanding about him. And I think that may be one of the real secrets of leadership is I'm not asking you to do something hard without obviously and visibly being willing to do something hard myself. And that's a challenge to all of us in leadership positions. We're going to talk about that kind of willingness to renounce power. Think of what the rest of the world was like at the time. Now we're used to a president serves 2 terms, and that's the way it is. So that's what we're used to. But the world at the time was a different place. I mean, the world at the time was generally, governments were run by monarchs or sultans or, some form of a religiously anointed leader that would be there for a very long time, for life, unless somebody knocked him off. And that was the way the world was. And so the framers of the Constitution set this up very differently, really tried to alter the course of kind of human history about what a government was. But they had to have a leader at the top who fully embraced it. And Washington was so popular that he could have been a king, he could have been a president for a long period of time. But he was able to look into the future enough to understand that the better thing for the country was to have a tradition of citizen servants who would serve for a period of time and then step back. And it wasn't all altruistic. He also had a deep love for his family in Mount Vernon and the quiet virtues of life, reading and other pursuits, farming and making whiskey. Thank goodness. That's one of the things I love about him. So he understood that the joys of private life were very, very significant. But his willingness at the start to establish the tradition that power is held and then power is relinquished, peaceful transfers of power, we're used to those now. That was not that common back then, peaceful transfers of power. So he got us off on a really good start. Still look around the world today. Peaceful transfers of power in big swaths of the world are still the exception, not the rule. But thank goodness for the democracies, whether it's our America or whether it's European democracies or countries like India. The example that Washington set about peaceful transfers of power, even to different political parties, is an idea that's so powerful that it is, it's not universal, but it is spread since his time. And that's an important thing to know too. If you're De Gaulle, I think it's De Gaulle who has the phrase, "The graveyards are filled with indispensable men." When you're in a position of power, you can think of yourself as indispensable. You can think, how can anything happen without me? You have to have a humility, which is ultimately a spiritual humility, to recognize that life's gone on before you, life's going to go on after you. The institution that you may be the head of, whether it's a university, a business, being a governor, being a senator, it's going to survive. And you ought to have the humility to recognize it. Washington teaches us that. I ran my first race in 1994. There wasn't the internet. It wasn't so commonly used so that a stupid remark could get spread around. There wasn't YouTube, so something you said stupidly could be filmed and shown around. You didn't have to raise as much money to run for a city council race in Richmond. It was easy to get in as a 35-year-old in 1994. And I worry a little bit now about, with the challenges of being in politics, whether people of good character, that there's potential George Washingtons born in the world every day. But will they be willing to serve publicly, or will the sacrifice of time and finances and the attention that will be paid to you when you say something stupid, and everybody's going to say something stupid and do something stupid. We're humans. The attention paid to your past and your record. Have you ever done anything that you're not completely excited about the world knowing? And the answer is everybody would say yes. So I worry a little bit now that will the George Washingtons who are born today step up to be public servants? And that, is obviously a mission of Mount Vernon and of the library to encourage that to happen. Now, there are some things I know now that I didn't know when I started, and one of them we've talked about already, which is, as passionately as people feel about issues, there are very few people at the end of the day who really are single issue, people who really vote based on, do you agree with me or not on this one issue? Most people are looking for character rather than the agreement on the 3 or 4 issues they care most about. And they'll actually vote for folks that they disagree with on issues if they feel like there's something right about their character. Now, I have heard it said sometimes, well, how could you vote for this person? He has a different point of view. I almost hear sometimes people criticized for casting a vote for somebody that may be different on issues, but the bottom line is, I think a character judgment is the best thing to base a vote on, because whatever anybody says in a campaign about how I'm going to vote on the following 5 issues, one thing you know for sure, there will be a big hard problem that will come up that nobody thought about during the campaign. It wasn't on anybody's radar screen. And if you vote based on someone's character, because you know kind of their yardstick, you're voting based on, I don't know what the problems will be tomorrow, but I have enough trust in your character that I think you'll approach them the right way. So actually, I think character is the right way probably for voters to vote rather than just agreement on issues. And I've come to understand over 20 years in public life that, again, even folks who disagree with you on an issue, if they think that you're really grappling with the question, you're really thinking about it hard, and you've come to a decision, and even if they would make the decision differently, if they feel like you're coming to it out of a moral sense, not from what a poll tells you, not from whether it's popular or not, they'll generally go with you, even if they disagree with the decision that you made. Washington understood that. I don't think I understood it really very well when I got into office, but over time, again and again and again, I've had experiences that have kind of reminded me of that. Doing the popular thing and then having people not that happy I did it, or doing the unpopular thing and having people perfectly comfortable that I did it. I mean, it seems paradoxical, but if you think about it, it really is about character. And that's what people want in their leaders, in their families, in their friends. That's what we want in our kids, as we're parents raising children. What would we most want? That somebody has a high IQ or that somebody has a really strong character? We want in our kids that they have a strong character.